Olá, bom dia a todos. Eu
Bom
sou
dia a
Mariam
todos.
Nikravech.
Muito prazer, Mariam, que bom tê-la aqui conosco. A Mariam é doutoranda na Técnica Universidade de Berlim, no Departamento de Educação e Nutrição Sustentável e Ciências Food Science. Então, a Mariam é uma excelente pesquisadora nessa temática que ela estará conversando conosco hoje sobre acceptance of insects as food and meat and insect feed animals, ou seja, aceitação de insetos como alimentos e substituição à carne animal. Então, Mário, seja muito bem-vinda. Estamos muito felizes com a tua presença aqui hoje. Tenho certeza que será de grande contribuição a tua palestra na formação acadêmica dos nossos alunos. E então, fique à vontade para fazer a tua apresentação.
Obrigada, Andrea, pela oportunidade e pela apresentação. Então, bom dia a todos. Eu sou Mariam Nikravech. Eu vou falar em inglês, porque a palestra foi preparada em inglês e vai ser bem mais fácil. Mas se vocês tiverem perguntas, pode falar em português e vou ver se respondo em inglês ou português, viu? Então, so as Andrea said, today my presentation will be about the acceptance of insect as food and meat in insect-fed animals. This research that we carried on was part of a bigger project called SUSInchain that was conducted in Europe. It was a European-funded research project, so I'll give a little bit of information as well about this. And we carried on a discrete choice experiment, which is a very specific methodology in order to investigate the acceptance of consumers for certain type of products, especially when the products are not fully available in the market. So before we get to these points, I also present you some properties of insect as food, because that's also the main reason why we are interested in insect as food, is that there are actually some very interesting properties of them. So we start with this, then I'll show you some aspects, like an overview of the project and what is important to think about when investigating insect as food on the entire insect value chain from farm to fork. Then we'll go on the discrete choice experiment methodology so that you can understand what can be implemented to investigate the acceptance and the consumer preferences for certain type of products, especially here for insects. And then I'll present you some select results on trust and acceptance for such products in Europe, which was our field of research. So what is so special, first of all, about a potential of insects as food? There are some facts. First of all, there are over 1 million species of insects that are, and of which about 2,000 are consumed worldwide by over 2 billion people. So there is already entomophagy in human populations, right? They are interesting because they have, most of them have a very high fertility rate. Some of them even can have more than one generation of offsprings per year. That's what's called multivoltinism. And they are very efficient in converting feed, right, into protein. Like, it's comparable to chicken and fish. So when you give feed to an insect, then it will be able to grow quite quickly and and then to be consumed in its turn. They can also, they are very also efficient to convert some organic residues like food waste, food production waste, right? Like byproduct from other food production activities into high quality protein. So they are very interesting in that sense to consider as food, because they can also be used in order to use some other side streams from the production value chain, right? And on the other hand, they also require very little space, very little resources, such as very little water, but are very rich in nutrients and proteins. So that made them very advantages as an alternative protein source in food instead of meat, especially given the growing number of human inhabiting the Earth. It's interesting to consider this replacing part of the meat with some alternative source of proteins, and insect could be one of them, right? But we have an issue, which is that consumer acceptance is in some part of the world, especially in Europe, or maybe we can talk later about the case of Brazil. Consumer acceptance is quite low, so it needs to be addressed. But before we go to this, we just focus first quickly about the nutrition aspects of insect as food. They are a high source of energy, so as carbohydrates, but also as macronutrients, be it protein. As I said, they are like highly very rich in protein and in fat, right? As well as micronutrients like minerals and vitamins. There were some recent research projects that showed that in terms of fat, for instance, they are very interesting. They present some omega-3, omega-6 fatty acids ratio that is quite interesting for some insects at least. So here in this slide, you can see an overview of the nutrient composition of some insect orders here. That was derived by in the literature review by Rumpon and Schluter. And you can see here in red the protein share, the share of protein in insects and of lipid in yellow, that are then quite a main component of insects, right? We can see that this type of insects and crickets, grasshoppers, and locusts have very high protein content, which make them quite interesting then to consider. We need, of course, to compare them to other type of protein, especially compare them to conventional animal-based food sources. We can see that when they are fresh, the insects, like fresh insects, may have a slightly lower to comparable protein content compared to conventional animal-based food. But if you consider them dry, here's the second box here. They are, and that's actually under this form, that are mostly incorporated into processed food. Then in that case, they show quite higher protein content than freshly meat, but also compared to eggs as well. So they are interesting, especially if you consider them in their dry form. If you compare them to plant-based protein sources, such as wheat flour, they are a superior source of protein. And it's not on the slide, but it's also compared to soy protein, also a superior source of protein, right? So they are very interesting because they have comparable to higher protein content compared to some other source of protein, animal-based and plant-based. So that's why we need to consider them. This type of protein also is interesting because, I mean, we're talking about high quality protein here in this graph, also produced by Rumpon and Schluter and WHO. We see the composition of the amino acid spectra of certain insect orders here. And we can see in red the amino acid requirements for human in red here. And we can see here from this graph that these insects generally meet these requirements. So they are an adequate and even very high valuable source of protein, because the amino acid spectra that they present is very broad and covers the human requirements, right? So these are the nutrition aspects of insects that make them very interesting. But in additional or compared to the nutrition benefit, of course, it's important to consider the potential hazard of edible insects. So here they could be, I mean, some insect species do contain anti-nutritives like tannins, but so far, like most recent studies showed no critical amounts that to consider. So this risk is quite low. They present to some extent a toxic potential because they produce toxins, because they also accumulate them via the feed, so the feed that they are uptaking, like plant toxins, pesticides, or heavy metal or mycotoxins. But this is like any other animal type, right? Any other protein type. And exactly the same, just like any type of food that presents protein, insects also have an allergenic potential. And there was also some cross allergies that were found with shellfish. So this is one risk that needs to be considered is the allergenic potential sector. Zoonotic risk was found so far quite low. So it means that they do not carry diseases that are going to be carried on later or given to humans, because they are only function as vectors. Yet, since they are grown or they are raised on the ground, and they're also consumed as fresh insect, or all insects that are consumed ungutted, so their organs are not taken out, there might be some microbial safety to consider because of pathogens, spores, all the gut microbiota also, or spoilage bacteria that they can also exist. So this is something that needs to be absolutely considered, controlled, but as long as they are reared and processed in appropriate controlled conditions, like any other food, that they are being decontaminated, stored quite in a proper way, these hazards that are mentioned above can be then eliminated. So there was just to make clear that this type of safety aspects of insect as food are also being considered, but so far being done in the proper condition, with safety regulation and protocols, help then maintaining their edibility and their nutritional factors without the potential hazards. Yeah. So also another point that was also mentioned before, they are highly valuable in terms of their environmental properties. I mean, compared to other type of animal-based proteins, insects present quite a number of advantages. Especially they, in order to grow or to rear insects, you need much less land than for ruminants, for instance, but also chicken or pigs. There was this figure that 1 kilo of insects require 10% of land that is used for production of 1 kilo of beef, which makes them very, very interesting in order to produce more valuable protein within a smaller space. There are Latin life cycle assessment that also showed quite some potential interesting positive environmental effects of having a small edible insect production unit. They are this Latin life cycle assessment considers some different aspects like line occupation, mineral extraction, the ecotoxicity of rearing insects, especially with the use of biowaste, and show that they are actually quite positive. Some other study also showed that they are the effects on rearing insects on global warming are quite negative or neglectable. I mean, there are of course some effects of rearing insects, but these are still very lower than other type of meat sources compared to chicken and especially to beef. These effects of rearing insects on global warming are neglectable. Also, when you consider some in terms, that was calculations in terms of CO2 equivalent, but you look at some specific greenhouse gases emissions like methane and ammonia. In the study of Onings and a co-author, the emissions of these two gases were found quite limited. So they are compared to other type of animal-based protein or type of meat. They are very interesting because of their environmental positivity, contrary to other type of food. Right. So now that you got an idea of the interest that the arguments in favor of eating insects, of including them more in the global diets as an alternative source of proteins, I'll give you a little overview of the Horizon 2020 project SUSInchain that, for these reasons, try to investigate more how to include insects as alternative protein source, and especially to boost the development of a sustainable and competitive European insect value chain in order to substantially increase the economic value of this insect value chain, but also to promote the protein transition by 225 with an uptake, with replacement, like progressive replacement of meat-based protein to other type of proteins. So that's why it was acquired into a certain call that was trying to find out, to investigate alternative protein for food and feed. And this project dured 4 years. It just ended this month, in order then, as said, to enable this European insect value chain to be then fully mature, and also to enable the protein transition. So it was a big project with 35 institutional partners from the industry all the way to academia. We, as a TU Berlin, had the great opportunity to take part of. So now I give you a little overview, because as said, SUSInchain actually consider the entire insect value chain from the farm, so the insect rearing part, all the way to the food consumption, so the fork. And in this project, there was a focus on certain type of promising insect species that are used in Europe. I mean, we saw before there were about 2,000 insect species that are known to be consumed by human beings on Earth. But in Europe, only a few so far are considered for commercialization, industrialization, and are also allowed by regulation, by European regulation. So we have here the black soldier fly that is used for feed, so to feed animals that are going then to be used for meat. The housefly, the mealworm, and the house cricket. The housefly, mealworm, as well as black soldier fly being represented in two of their development stages, the pupae here, as well as the adult form, right? So, as said, insects can be used both directly for human consumption, whole or as ingredient, but also be integrated as feed for fish and certain farm animals. In Europe, poultry and pigs are allowed to be fed with insects as well as fish. So that's where we do the differentiation between direct and indirect entomophagy. So in this project, there was a certain number of hurdles that were considered and that we tried to investigate. As said, in Europe, there is already an insect value chain that already exists, but it remains of quite small importance due to mismatch between the demand and supply. And this prevents the full value chain to become economically practical and viable on an industrial scale. So far, the rearing and production units that exist are of quite experimental to small scale, And the idea would be to make them grow fully in order to scale up and become of an industrial level. So I'll just briefly go through a couple of major hurdles and problematics that need to be considered when considering insect as food and feed, about the insect rearing aspects. So how to deal with side streams that cannot be fed to animals, how to convert this type of side stream, for instance, low-grade leftover organic side stream into high-grade protein, how to minimize the effect of pests and diseases that exist among insects, how to make sure that they will not spread among the entire insect population of a production unit, and also how to upscale at all this production in order to produce larger quantities, and how to use substrate and frost, how to ensure the quality of this, and in order to create the best, to optimize the quality of the protein produced from these insects. At the processing stage, questions that were raised as part of the project was about the challenges to store, to transport, and to process, of course, the insects into highly valuable food product while keeping their quality, and did all of this at large-scale volume. So how to transfer the processing technology from a small experimental scale to a large-scale level, while ensuring the quality of the insects and the product. Yes, so that were big issues or questions that were raised and that were investigated as part of the project. Of course, this comes along with the question of the safety of the insect production, how to ensure or to minimize the microbiological, chemical, algenic risk, especially how to ensure the safety of insects for consumers themselves, but also for all supply chain actors like workers working on daily basis in production units. So the idea was to develop safety protocols and good practices in order to respect the safety of insects. As it's been considered that insects are more sustainable source of protein than other type of farm animal. A question that also needs to be investigated even deeper, and that was investigated as part of the project, was also the identification of requirements that need to be fulfilled in order to reach these positive environmental effects to reduce climate change, but all of this without diminishing the economic profitability of insects. So that was a quite important aspects to investigate the sustainability of insect value chain. Related to the use of insect as feed. As said, the EU legislation enables insect as feed only in some type of animal, fish, and since recently poultry and pigs. So the idea is to create also meals that are insect-based meals for this farm animal and fish that are digestible, that are optimal also to enable the full animal performance, animal health, and product quality, of course. So these were investigated as well. And of course, most importantly for us, let's say as a final consumer, we also had a major part of the project focusing on the insect of use in food. So how to design the best insect-based food product that can be then integrated in domestic preparations and then integrating the regular diet of European households, with this goal of replacing up to 20% of animal-based protein by insect-based proteins by 2025. So there was the development of insect-based food product, and of course, how to enable also to increase, first of all, the human acceptance of this type of insect-based proteins. And that's where we at the TU Berlin were involved in the project. We investigated how to gain trust and increase consumer acceptance in order then to make to increase the demand for such food products based on insects. So that's where we're going to have a look at now. How to increase market opportunities and to reduce barriers, especially consumer side barriers of trust and acceptability. So, I said there is a quite low consumer acceptance in Europe, despite 1 million of consumers worldwide. There are actually very little present in European consumption habit, and there are only very anecdotal traces of the use of insects in some regions of Europe. It's very restricted. Apparently, there are some traces of use in ancient Greece that was found. In some regions, there might be some very typical food product using insects, but they are not widely accepted and widely consumed across Europe. Instead, insects might inspire fear or disgust. They are not considered culturally and socially acceptable, and they are just not present. People never don't try because they're not. There are no food products really that exist that allow to do so. Yet, more and more, there is this emerging trend of using insect as food. But there's a certain type of food considered exotic, luxury, to be consumed as part of a special culinary experience, like to be eaten on vacation in an exotic country or on a fair to try some novel foods. So there is this progressing this new type of practices coming out associated with certain segment of population of consumers that are willing to try this new experience. And so far it was found out that these segments of population might be rather young males that are willing to have some adventure and sensation-seeking experience with food and will be willing to try insects. But this is, as I said, a very small part of a very small segment of the population, but still it gives hope to investigate more and to use this type of profile as an early adopter profile in order for this food innovation to be then to finally grow and be widely adopted. We need, of course, to consider some other aspects, some psychological aspects like past consumption experience, psychological factors like food neophobia, familiarity with the idea of eating insects, but also environmental attitudes. So the readiness of people to accept insects because of their environmental value. So these are things that need to be considered, of course, when considering the consumer acceptance for insects. And these reasons, I mean, these things are quite these developments are quite new. They go along with some new European legislation that now also provides this framework for a more production and commercialization of this insect-based food. That's why we are entitled to do such research. So, as said, we are now trying to assess this acceptance. I mean, as part of this project, we try to assess the consumer acceptance of insect-based proteins, especially by final consumers. And we did so by investigating the preferences and the willingness to pay for such products. We also try to identify what the effect of trusting such food product and also of past experience of insect as food on choice. Are people who trust more insect-based food and are people who already have an experience of eating insect more willing to choose an insect-based food product? We also tested a strategy in order to increase this acceptance. It's to say providing some extra information about eating insects. Does prior information about the insect protein content of a food product or about its sustainability help consumers to accept more or to prefer more insect-based food? So that's what we also did, and I'm going to present some results about this. So here, yeah, basically that's the research questions and objective that I just stated, whereby we're going to assess and estimate, first of all, these consumer preferences for insect-based food product, but also meat from insect-fed animal. Try to identify the effects of providing information on choosing such products, and also to what extent trust and past experience influence the choice. So for this, we based our empirical strategy on a discrete choice experiment. I don't know if you're familiar with this topic, with this methodology. Maybe we can exchange a bit about this in the chat later. But this discrete choice experiment have been shown so far to be an appropriate method to elucidate preferences, consumer preferences. And they've been more and more used in order to assess consumer food choice behavior in particular, even in hypothetical situations as with phase one, so with a product that is not fully commercialized on the market. This is a very practical methodology to employ, because they allow to elicit preference for products that are outside of the current market range, right? So we completed a data collection about years ago, and we did so in Germany, Italy, and Portugal, where we collected responses for in total about 1,523 consumers with panels. And here is the small table that describes our panel. We did so with a quota sampling. And here you can see some basic characteristics of the socio-demographic of our Italian, German, and Portuguese participant. There were our participant or our sample were representative based on the household composition and on the sex of the respondents. They are very close to the representative census data. And when we have a look at some other things, for instance, diets, it's quite interesting because we see that there are more vegetarian and to some extent vegan consumers in Germany within the German panel than the others, which makes sense. And that on the other hand, when it comes to past insect eating experience, similar, the proportion are similar across countries and are actually quite quite makes sense that most, like 3/4 of the participants never ever tried insects in the past, not even once. So the concept of a choice experiment is the following. Respondents are asked to choose from various alternative options, and they have to choose the most preferable one, just like if they were about to buy it. So they are provided with a list of characteristics that we call attributes, and a price that also varies. We also included a picture of the product. It could be a ready-to-mix powder, ready-to-cook meatballs, or ready-to-eat meatballs, right? So it was basically a package of preparation for meatballs made of either pea chicken, that could be either grain-fed, like normal chicken, or insect-fed chicken, or insects, either cricket or mealworm larvae. There were some other characteristics here that were also varied. And here is the example of a choice task. So our participants were exposed with 10 of these choice tasks. So they had to choose 10 times among 2 options, or to take also none of them, right? So the idea is that each decision maker derives a utility from each of these choice alternatives, and this utility is partly explained by a vector of preferences for the different attributes that we have listed here. Right? And in order to estimate and define utility that is associated with the product, we use a random parameter multinomial logarithm model, also called mixed multinomial logarithm model, in order to estimate the attribute effects or the individual preferences for each and every attribute. So now I'm going to introduce you to the results of this choice experiment based on these models. So don't let you impress by the slide. I don't know how familiar you are with this type of analysis, but basically what interests us as long as acceptance or preferences for insect is concerned are these. We can see that as expected, the consumer preferences for meatballs that were made of insect, either mealworm or cricket, were significantly lower than normal grain-fed chicken in all three countries. That's why we see negative estimate and also that were significant, right? So this is quite expectable in line with previous studies. What's interesting is that we also included, and that was the first time doing so, the preferences for insect-fed chicken, so in this indirect entomophagy. We can also see here from the estimates that the consumers for Germany, Italy, and Portugal also preferred grain-fed chicken to insect-fed chicken, but still the estimates are still quite lower than direct entomophagy. So it can be quite interesting to consider an insect-fed chicken still indirect entomophagy compared to their direct entomophagy. When we compare it with pea, we also included pea as another type of protein. We see that people or consumers, except for Portugal, equally preferred it or liked it equally to grain-fed chicken. So we can see a sort of hierarchy in terms of preferences, pea being equal to grain-fed chicken, insect-fed chicken being a bit lowly or less preferred, and cricket and mealworm being really less preferred. Yes. So still, this is quite of an interesting results for us, because now we know that insect-fed chicken is was the most preferred non-plant-based alternative to grain-fed chicken, which then gives some interesting insights for the insect value chain to focus maybe more on insect as feed in order to feed the chicken. Here is a little summary of what we just saw, that insect-fed chicken was actually the least disfavored alternative, as said in Germany and Portugal. And there are some other attributes that can be considered, especially that European consumers of all three countries preferred food that was products that were of EU or local origin based, organic product that didn't really care about which producer, be it a multinational company or startup, produced the product. And along with the theory, all consumers prefer lower prices, which is quite normal results to obtain. We also convert this in terms of euros. So I don't know to what extent this might be relevant for you guys, but basically the idea is similar. We converted to see how many euros your consumer will be willing to pay for a product taking these attributes. And we see from the euro amounts that Italian, Portuguese, and German consumers were highly reluctant to substitute their grain-fed chicken with meatballs that were insect-based. We see it by the very high amount of money that they will be willing to pay. Actually, the fact that there are even negative amounts might indicate that consumers are even willing to receive a premium, so to be paid in order to try such products, which makes it shows even more the discrepancy between the supply and the demand, because insects are also very expensive to rear and to process, which makes it, of course, complicated to deal with the very picky preferences of European consumers. Let's quickly move on to strategies then that can help us increase the preference of European consumers for insects. We try to provide a prior information, see whether giving an information to consumers might change their preferences. We did so by including a little text before the choice experiment or before each choice task, where we ask in a very basic version, a baseline version, which of the following product would they choose to prepare a meal, and in two other versions where we phrased or primed more the content, the insect protein content. As such, you have heard that minced meat can be replaced with other products, including products which contain insect proteins. We also ask in a second scenario, or in a third scenario, whether they would be willing to choose a product that was and mention the fact that minced meat can be replaced with an alternative product in order to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and eat more sustainably. So here, the claim of the sustainability of meat alternatives was then here included. So we varied this, the information. I mean, we randomly allocated one of the following scenario to each of the participants in order to detect the effect of such information. And here we saw something quite interesting. About the claim of sustainability of meat alternative, we could see that in Germany and Portugal, this type of claim that meat alternatives are more sustainable was associated actually with higher preferences for insect-fed chicken, and to some extent also for cricket in Germany and worms in Italy and Portugal. So here we can see that sustainability, making the sustainability of meat alternatives more salient might be helpful to increase the preferences of several insect-based food products in all three countries, as well as insect-fed chicken. On the other hand, making the insect protein content of these meatballs more salient was also found positive, significant, but only to a certain extent, and this on mealworms in Portugal, that you can see here, and to some extent, and to some extent I didn't put the box, but it's also to some extent on crickets in Germany. So here is a little summary of the full estimate table that we saw before. Basically, it appeared from our results that framing sustainability of meal alternative might be associated with higher preferences for diverse type of food products in all three countries. The insect protein content also was found positive work, but to a lesser extent. It was and this on only cricket for Germany and mealworm in Portugal. So this helps us a lot to identify what type of argument could be included in order to make people choose more insect-based food product and insect-fed animal. Right. Now, very quickly, because maybe we want also to have some question and answer session, we investigated as well the effect of trust and of having already tried insect as food in the past on the choice of insect-based food products. And here we found, in a quite astonishing way, that high level of trust in all three countries were associated with higher preferences for cricket, mealworm, and insect-fed chicken as main ingredient. So it means that people or consumers that are trusting this type of food products are also more willing to choose these type of products, which is quite an important results that was and quite innovative results. When looking at experience, we could also see that having already tried experiences in the past is also associated with more preference, with higher preferences for these products, especially related to cricket that we saw both in Italy, in Germany, and Portugal, and to some extent also for mealworm that was found positively associated in Portugal. So yeah, basically that's what we found, that of course, in general, there are comparatively low preference and willingness to pay values for insect-based food product and insect-based meatballs alternative in this case, associated also with very low willingness to pay. That is so negative. Also for insect-fed chicken, which highlighted basically the challenges that acceptance for insect-based food product that we are still facing for the broader population. So we found this, but that still gives hope that these barriers might be lower for production of ingredients for the feed industry in order to provide feed for chicken, for instance, for poultry, also from other type of farm animals. So this is quite interesting to see, as well as the provide. We also found that the provision of extra information is also quite beneficial in order to increase the preference for insect ingredients, right? So these were quite novel insights that this research allowed to find, that providing information on sustainability of alternative also can be quite valuable to include as part of marketing campaign, for instance, on label and packaging. And the fact also that we found high association between high trust and preferences for cricket and mealworms, as well as insect-fed chicken in our country of investigation, also emphasizes the need to stimulate trust belief in insect-based food product. And this also doing so targeting on the specific species. And this should be done by allowing more transparency on the farming sectors, enhancing public relation communication about how insects are processed, about the very low risks that are associated with, in order for consumers to trust them more. Also, importantly, about the prior experience of testing of eating insects. This also highlights the need to develop more possibilities to create first positive tasting experience. For instance, that could be done by having product on special offer, on a mess, on catering outlets, in malls, maybe in school and university canteens or sport events, and also to or maybe also through mainstream food chain and retailer, right? For instance, via tasting stands. That could be an idea also to develop the access to a first tasting experience in order to then include enhance the acceptance and for such products. So this is basically it. I'm thanking you a lot for your attention. As a quite feedback question, would be also interesting to hear about the edible insects that you have been exposed to in your own food culture or in other countries or regions that you've been visiting for living, for vacations, for research stay, and into which form they are. So in case there is any feedback from this, from you said on this, I'd be very happy to hear. I'm also really happy to hear about your questions and remarks. And otherwise, obrigada pela sua atenção.
Obrigada, Mariam, pela brilhante apresentação. Muito instigante tudo isso. Essa temática no Brasil é nova. Ainda há muito que ser pesquisado. Eu acho que o consumidor brasileiro ainda tem muita dificuldade em aceitar esse tipo de produto como um substituto à origem de proteína. Nós temos aqui algumas perguntas do Ryan, que é nosso aluno de doutorado, que ele diz o seguinte, que nas tribos indígenas existem certos insetos que são comestíveis. Tu lembra, Mariam, que a Júlia, da Argentina, tinha falado isso? Que as tribos poderiam comer alguns insetos. Eu disse, não conheço, porque as tribos que eu conheço não comem insetos. Mas Ryan está afirmando que tem. A saúva é uma formiga, um ant, uma formiga. Ela é gordinha, assim, é bem grande, assim. E eles comem essa saúva. Então, eu desconhecia. Em São Paulo, também tem restaurantes que servem pratos como delicatessen de insetos, que eu também desconheci. Aqui no Sul, eu não tenho nenhum conhecimento de insetos que a gente consome. Se alguém tiver, pode escrever ali no chat para a gente compartilhar com a Mariam essa experiência. E mais alguma pergunta, pessoal? Se alguém tiver algum questionamento, eu achei muito bacana que, de certa forma, existe um nível de preferência baixo, mas existe. Eu acho que isso não é possível no Brasil. Além das perguntas, pode falar? Mais alguém gostaria de fazer alguma pergunta? Sim, ainda há baixo conhecimento sobre... Sim, pode falar, Mariam.
Eu teria uma pergunta para os participantes dessa palestra. Se vocês já provaram um inseto para comer.
Alguém já provou insetos como fonte de proteína? Alguém pode escrever no chat se quiser. Enquanto vocês escrevem, vou compartilhar brevemente. No curso em Berlim, nós fomos para a cozinha e nós preparamos 4 pratos, né, com insetos. Esses insetos que são comestíveis e autorizados pelo regulamento europeu. Então, nós tivemos as bolinhas, em vez de carne, é bolinha de inseto. Pauda, né, foi feito um pó de um inseto. O outro era cricket, o grilo assado.
Grilo.
E o que mais? Eu não me lembro, eram 4 pratos.
Também um prato feito com larvas de mealworm.
Isso, mealworm. É um tipo de verme.
Besouro. É larva de besouro.
Larva de besouro. Foi uma experiência muito incrível, porque foi minha primeira experiência em provar um alimento com insetos. Quando a gente enxerga um inseto, a gente fica um pouco assim, agoniado. E quando a gente não enxerga, a sensação é outra, porque tu não sabe que o inseto está moído, está dentro do caldo do recheio, por exemplo. É muito interessante a gente entender essas percepções do consumidor. como ele reage, quanto ele está disposto a pagar. Willingness to pay, né? Quer dizer, as pessoas querem um plus, querem receber um valor para consumir insetos, né? Então, um aluno está escrevendo aqui, Mariam, que está longe da nossa realidade o consumo de insetos, porque nós temos muita carne. O que você acha?
É exatamente o mesmo aqui na Europa, né? A gente não se pode, como dito, não se pode imaginar ou achar comer inseto numa base regularmente, não? Pode ser como uma experiência única só numa feira, por exemplo, não? Mas não necessariamente de mudar a dieta regular para comer mais desse. Mas eu acho que a diferença maior entre o Brasil e a Europa, e mais especificamente com a Alemanha, e que aqui na Alemanha tem mais gente que são pessoas que já são prontas para comer outras coisas, né? Por exemplo, que tem um regime vegetariano. Não, ó, é claro que que ser vegetariano é contraditório um pouco com comer insetos, não? Mas tem outros movimentos ou outros jeitos de comer. Isso pode ser, não sei, isso pode ser também uma pergunta regional. Lá no sul do Brasil tem uma cultura da carne mais forte, não é? Se não me engano.
Sim, carne bovina, carne de gado. E eu acho que tudo isso é muito interessante, eu acho que abre a nossa cabeça para ver as opções e um futuro, né, mais sustentável, talvez um alimento mais sustentável. Acho que as empresas estão olhando para isso também, né? Um consumidor que está numa perspectiva mais sustentável da sua alimentação, mais preocupado com questões ambientais. E o Ryan e o Kleber colocaram aqui no chat que experimentaram saúva, grilo, assado, que acharam muito bacana.
Ok.
Foi uma experiência muito bacana. Então, é um experimento, né?
E Ryan seria pronto para provar de novo ou foi a única?
Foi a única experiência muito bacana.
Grilo assado também. Ok. É muito legal
muito legal, né?
de ouvir isso.
Muito
O que foi
bom.
sua experiência também, Andrea? Você gostou da comida lá, né, em Berlim?
Bacana, mas ao mesmo tempo, quando eu vi os mealworms, eu fiquei com nojo, assim, estranho. Comeria de novo, porque parece um chips, né? Parece uma coisa crocante e é diferente. Eu acho que foi uma experiência muito, muito bacana, que eu conto para os alunos aqui. Foi muito bacana toda essa experiência. A Jéssica está dizendo que comeu saúva frita, formiga frita com farinha de mandioca. É um delicatessen, né? É um prato típico regional. Bacana, né?
Muito interessante.
Muito interessante.
Tem algumas pessoas aqui que já tenham provado insetos, né? O que você falou é muito importante também, né? Da forma, né? Qual forma esses insetos são integrados no prato, né? São na forma inteira ou não molhada, mas em pó, assim, moído. Vai ter um efeito bem diferente, né, sobre a percepção dos consumentes para esses, né? Ter inteiro vai dar nojo e não inteiro, então não visível, vai ser um pouco mais fácil para aceitar, né?
Exato, exato. Aqui também nós usamos um cochonilha é um bichinho pequenininho, que eu não sei explicar direito, para corante de iogurte. Então, é usado para dar cor ao iogurte. Sabe o iogurte natural, que é branco? O iogurte, que é...
Iogurte. Uhum.
Para ele ficar pink, cor-de-rosa, é adicionado esse bichinho moído. Uma coisa assim, resumindo assim, de forma bem grotesca. Então, além disso, a Jéssica pergunta sobre a gastronomia, de restaurantes usarem insetos em seus pratos.
É uma questão legal. Na verdade, uma estratégia muito interessante para promover mais insetos como comida. E já tem aqui na Europa alguns atentos para fazer isso, de trabalhar com chefes que vão integrar insetos em pratos de luxo, né? Para a gente ver que se podia comer, não? É um canal bem interessante e funciona.
A pergunta do Anor aqui é sobre se esses insetos que tu pesquisou são coletados na natureza ou são criados em cativeiro? Em prisão, assim, em fechado?
São criados, não, tem vários, aqui na Europa são só criados em empresas.
São criados, tá. A Marielle colocou aqui no grupo que existe um grupo de pesquisa aqui na universidade que estuda insetos, eu não sabia. Aqui a Jéssica fala sobre have farmers, producers shown interest in this type of production. Produtores têm demonstrado interesse na produção de insetos?
Onde? Aqui na Europa? Na Europa tem definitivamente alguns produtores que estão desenvolvendo produção de insetos, né? E agora é a questão ou a pergunta de fazer essa produção maior. Agora é bem experimental e o assunto do projeto SUSINchain é de desenvolver essa cadeia de produção para assegurar uma produção de qualidade, de inseto de qualidade, mas de nível industrial.
Tá certo. Muito bom. Mais alguma pergunta? Telespectadores, tá, essa da Aline nós já colocamos. Você tem mais algum comentário? A Marielle colocou aqui, o tema é bastante recente no Brasil. A gente já pode observar algumas experiências. Acredito que estudos são necessários para avaliar a intenção dos consumidores brasileiros. Acho que é isso, né? Quer dizer, ainda precisa de muito estudo para entender o consumidor brasileiro, o quanto ele está disposto a pagar, qual é o comportamento dele numa escolha entre tipos de proteína, por exemplo. Então, tem um grande campo de trabalho pela frente, para quem se interessar pelo tema, né?
Claramente. Então, pediu que tem interesse também lá no Brasil para desenvolver esse tipo de pesquisa, não?
Exato. Acho que é um grande campo de trabalho aqui.
Aqui também na Europa, não? Ainda também, tem muito trabalho para fazer.
Tem muito trabalho, muito bem. Mariam, então, acredito que nós podemos finalizar a nossa palestra. Eu gostaria de te agradecer novamente pela tua dedicação, pelo teu tempo, por compartilhar conosco e com os alunos a tua experiência nesse grande projeto tão importante e que você tenha muito sucesso na tua carreira, que vai defender a tese em dezembro, vai fazer um pós-doc na universidade, então ficamos à disposição para fazer outra palestra com você. Seja sempre bem-vinda aqui na universidade, no nosso programa de pós-graduação também. E meus agradecimentos por hoje, pelo dia de hoje.
Obrigada eu. Muito, muito obrigada pela oportunidade de apresentar essa palestra. Foi uma experiência legal e espero que a gente se veja daqui a pouco, em pessoal, ou pessoalmente, ou de novo aqui nesse formato também. Foi um prazer. E...
Obrigada.
Então,
até
a próxima vez.
Au revoir.
Tschüss.
Tschüss.